Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my 3 keys to the game for Boise State versus Colorado State. The bye week is over. We're back into action. I know that might make a few of us nervous after how the last weekend ended for Boise State. Definitely not the result that we were looking for there. But Colorado State, of the teams left on Boise State's docket, the Colorado State definitely gives Boise State the best opportunity to come out of the bye week to get a chance to get back into rhythm. Nothing against Colorado State, but based on some of these teams that Boise State has left on their schedule here, besides potentially New Mexico, Colorado State gives them the best chance to get back into it without being challenged at necessarily the peak of competition in the Mountain West. Can't take Colorado State for granted. It's going to be a close game. Vegas, well, it's being predicted to be a close game. Vegas is predicting giving Boise State a 2.5 point spread, so 2.5 points on this one. So not a very, very wide margin of error here for Boise State according to Vegas. And ESPN giving them a 66.5% chance of winning. But both these teams, 3-4, same record. Colorado State actually has the record I predicted they would coming into this game. Boise State, not so much, but Colorado State does. So 3-4, both of these teams, not bowl game, not guaranteed for either of them right now. Definitely motivated to win, especially Colorado State. This is at Colorado State Stadium. Colorado State has never beaten Boise State. We're going to get to that here in a second. But they are definitely motivated too, and there's been some very close games at that stadium in recent history. So let's get right into talking about the series history. We'll get to the key players here, and then we'll get into the 3 keys of the game. We'll also do a little bit of a summary at the end, and I'll give you my score prediction. So Boise State versus Colorado State, we've played them 10 times, and every time has been a win. Actually, Colorado State holds a unique distinction. Unique in a certain extent, not necessarily a good one, but Colorado State and UNLV are the only 2 teams in the Mountain West to never beat Boise State at the FBS level. And as far as playing for all time, Colorado State's the only team in the Mountain West to never beat Boise State. UNLV beat Boise State a few times back when Boise State was in the FCS. I think back in the 70s is when the last time UNLV got a win there. But as far as FBS level, Colorado State and UNLV, the only 2 teams that have never beaten Boise State. Of course, first game against Colorado State was at Fort Collins. Not quite the recent grudge matches that have been played out in Fort Collins between Boise State and Colorado State. It was 2011 63-13 win. I still have that highlight DVD. Kellen Moore slinging it all over the field. It's a great one to watch. So the last couple games at Fort Collins, though, have not gone quite that way. Boise State has only won both of those by 7 or less points. 2019 was a 31-24 win, and then 2017 was a 59-52 win. Of course, that was the game that Boise State converted an onside kick to be able to go down and score and force overtime, and then, of course, win in overtime. So Boise State, we mentioned onside kicks. And of course, last week got the onside kick, and then things didn't turn out the way Boise State wanted them to. So hopefully we don't face another situation like that. But this is a rivalry. I'm not a rivalry. I wouldn't call this a rivalry necessarily. Though Colorado State is definitely motivated to win. But this is a series that has a little bit of onside kick history in it. And has definitely had some very, very close matchups. So we'll have to see if that happens this time. Key players that might have a say in that not being that way for Boise State are Bachmeier, thrown for almost 2,000 yards so far, 1,951 yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, has been a little inconsistent. I don't think that the loss was his fault last week against Air Force. So, of course, throwing the pick on that last play, which honestly there was holding against the Boise State receiver on that play. But he still shouldn't have thrown it because it was pretty tight coverage. Main point here, Bachmeier has put up some impressive stats, but has struggled to remain consistent throughout the whole game, and has also struggled to not push the ball into poor situations that he shouldn't, to make those game time, those game decisions, and has struggled with some of his decision making. We'll have to see what if he comes out of the bye week stronger, full 2 weeks basically of practice here to prep for this one. If he can come in, be calm like he was in the BYU game, a little more settled, and like for most of the Air Force game, more settled within himself, playing as a team versus trying to take the whole team on his shoulder. Khalil Shakir, of course, one of the greatest players on this Boise State team. He's had like 5 one-handed receptions so far this season. Amazing player for Boise State. 659 yards receiving, 4 touchdowns. Now, the issue here for Khalil Shakir, though, even though he's 659 yards receiving, and I think he's the best player on this Boise State team, he's been really underutilized the last 3 games, and 2 of those were losses. Last week against Air Force, he only had 4 receptions for 75 yards. Best player on the team, only touches it 4 times. Against BYU, which of course was a win, he only had 5 receptions for 66 yards. So even less yards in that one, even though he had 1 more reception. And against Nevada, he only had 4 receptions for 70 yards. So you're noticing a little bit of a trend there. Both of Boise State's recent losses, he's only had 4 receptions. Now, I know that early in the season he was hampered by some injuries that he was dealing with, but I don't believe that's the case anymore. And it's really, really confusing and a little bit worrying that he's not getting as many touches as I think a lot of us would like to see out of him. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But he's definitely going to be a key player here for Boise State. And then finally, the Boise State defense is really run through this man, the monster on defense, J.L. Skinner, 6'4", 218 pounds, according to his ESPN profile, has had 62 tackles and 3 passes deflected, has had a targeting call on him, and has a couple. Has he had 2 targetings called on him? I think he has. I think he has had 2 targetings called on him. Almost had another one last week, which was luckily overturned. Main point of that, though, is, and while you don't want to necessarily encourage targeting, the reason he's getting so many looks for targeting is because he just hits so hard. He brings the heat, brings the energy, brings that blue collar, put your hand in the dirt, just absolutely energy to the wall style of play that Andy Avalos is trying to build up in this unit. He really, I think, embodies the type of defense that Andy Avalos wants this Boise State defense to play. So, key players for Boise State there. Looking at Colorado State, now these are the guys that might try to say that this game should be close. Here is their quarterback, of course, Todd Centerio. Centio? I think it's Centio. I might have mispronounced that one, but I think it is Centio. Anyhow, 1,610 yards passing, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So not quite as impressive as Bachmeier, but still a good quarterback, especially by recent standards here. So, for Colorado State. So he's 1,610 yards passing. He also has 264 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground. So a little bit of a dual threat guy here. Not, obviously not necessarily as aggressive as as Dylan Gabriel, I think it was. Anyhow, as not necessarily as aggressive a dual threat runner as some of the other guys that Boise State has faced, but he has over 200 yards rushing on the ground here, so definitely a factor when Boise State is considering this on defense. As far as the running game goes, they have a few guys that kind of put it together. Yeah, Dylan Gabriel. Sorry, I don't know, I had like a little mind blank there. Anyhow, as far as the run game goes, not necessarily anyone who really stands out besides Centio here, but the big player for Colorado State, their best player on their roster, first-round draft pick potential here, is tight end Trey Mcbride, 6'4", 673 yards receiving. As a tight end, leads the team in receiving. So, and it's not even close after him. Colorado State has 2 wide receivers who each have 217 yards receiving. So those 2 guys are behind Mcbride here. But that's a 400-yard difference. Mcbride is definitely the number 1 target. The offense flows through Mcbride here. If Boise State can shut down their tight end in this offense, they're gonna struggle to move the ball against Boise State. So Boise State needs to be focusing, prioritizing. I'm not sure that they can do it. This is a Boise State secondary that is dealing with a lot of injuries. It's a young secondary, obviously still trying to adjust to the new defensive schemes. We'll have to see what happens in this one, but Mcbride is definitely going to be the key player of all the players for Colorado State. And then we should mention their defense here. Dequan Jackson here, linebacker for Colorado State, has 66 tackles, 6'2", 230 pounds. A really big guy there that Boise State's going to struggle to run the ball against for sure, and it definitely could be a factor in the passing game as well. I believe he's had 3 passes. No, he hasn't. Had no passes deflected, but he has a big threat against the run game. All right, cool. So let's talk about the 3 keys to the game here for Boise State versus Colorado State. So the first one here, and this is one that a lot of people, in my last video when I talked about Boise State and the terrible calls by the refs against Boise State in that matchup, a lot of people said, well, Boise State, if they were winning these games by as many points as they should be, if they were dominating like past Boise State teams, it wouldn't even matter. So that's actually going to be, that's a good point. That's my number 1 key here, is take it out of the refs' hands. Now, there's 2 parts of this. The first part is, you're right, Boise State should be dominating in such a fashion that it doesn't matter if the refs are trying to be biased, if they're trying to make bad calls against Boise State, it doesn't matter. The second factor here is that Boise State should be playing in a way that it doesn't even give the referees a chance to come after them for bad penalties. For instance, Boise State forced touching on the punt return last week against Keneho. The BYU defender threw him into the punt. So that should not have been called a turnover. It was a bad call. But Keneho shouldn't even have been in that situation. Khalil Shakir, whoever it was, I think it was Khalil Shakir, returning the punt, should have made the call for everybody to get out of the way for the punt, whatever their call is. Each team has a little bit of a different one there. But he should have made the call for them to get out of the way of the punt, and Keneho should have been 30 yards upfield by the time that punt rolled back. Unfortunate situation, bad call by the ref, but Boise State shouldn't have been in that position. Last week when Boise State had a couple of those other calls go their way against them, for instance, the Riley Smith call, what did they call it on? Offensive pass interference when he was trying to get through the defender and he kind of shouldered into him. It was within 3 yards. He was within his right. The defender actually got in his way. So it shouldn't even been called. If anything, it should have been called interference on the defender. Either way, it was within the first 3 yards. He had the right to push up against the defender in that one. Bad call, absolutely terrible call. Killed that drive, moved the ball back from the Air Force side on that final drive for Boise State, where they might have been able to go down and at least get a field goal. Moved it from the Air Force side, moved it to the Boise State 32 or something like that. So it was a massive swing in potential yardage. But Riley Smith should have played that one a little bit smarter. Don't at least if you're going to run through the defender, at least make it look like you are trying to run out for the pass. He did kind of lean into the defender on that play. Like I said, should have been legal, and either way, ticky-tack call, but take that out of the referee's hands. So part of this is dominate in such a fashion that the referees don't have a chance to influence the game, and the other one is play smart enough in a manner, play smart enough, play disciplined enough is what I'm trying to say there. Play disciplined enough where the referees don't have anything to call. So that's my first key here, is take it out of the referees' hands. Boise State has had 2 games so far that they have lost, primarily, evenly matched teams, primarily because of the referees. But they can take those wins back and take those away from the referees if they dominate and if they play a little bit more disciplined. And that's just symptomatic of a young coaching staff trying to adjust, and an offense and defense trying to adjust with a lot of new players, a lot of fresh players who don't necessarily have the same starting experience as previous Boise State rosters, trying to adjust to this new coaching staff. And I think we're going to see Boise State continue to improve this season and get better next year. And we'll see a lot of those opportunities for bad calls start to go away. All right, second key here. So take it out of the referee's hands. Second key, make Shakir the focal point of the offense. He is the best player on the field for Boise State. The running game's a little bit up in the air. We've had a bye week. It'll be interesting to see who comes back. If Helani is able to come back, if Cyrus, I would think Cyrus would be able to come back. He didn't look like he was too injured. I know he didn't play in the Air Force game, but we still aren't entirely sure what happened there with Cyrus, because it didn't really look like he got that hurt in that game, but it was enough to pull him out. So Boise State will be interesting to see who they get back offensively and defensively from this bye week, but the running game still has some questions, as it has all year, due to offensive line play, due to the running backs in the backfield, due to the offensive scheme, whatever it is. Boise State's running game has not been the running game of Boise State years past, even though this offensive line has started to show significant improvement with this new lineup that they've been running the last 3 games, or 4 games. No, I think it's 3 games, last 3 games. So, but take that concern out of the equation by putting it into your best receiver's hands. Khalil Shakir, anytime he touches the ball, he's making at least the first guy miss. If he gets that ball out in open space, he is making at least the first guy, if not the second and the third, and down the line, breaking into the second and third level of the defense. Boise State should be targeting him as many times as they can. And yes, part of the reason Boise State isn't getting as many passes off is probably because the defense is keying in on this key player for Boise State. But there's ways to beat that. There's ways to make up your offensive scheme so that Boise State can take advantage of their top player. And honestly, if the defense is so keyed in and stopping this one guy, there should be other Boise State wide receivers who are wide open, and we're not really seeing that. So it seems to me like it's some kind of scheme issue, but not necessarily taking advantage. Boise State needs to take advantage of their top receiver, whether that's in screens, wide receiver sweeps, short passes, wildcat, and of course using him in the deep ball like Boise State has all season. Whatever it is, Boise State needs to find ways to get their top top player the ball in these games. And I think we'd be seeing some different results in these ones if Khalil Shakir was touching the ball more. If he's hurt, that's a different story, but we don't have the information on that. All we know is Shakir looks like he's fine. There's no information to tell otherwise. He should be getting the ball as many times as Boise State can get it to him until other things start to open up for this offense. So, number 1, take it out of the referee's hands. 2, make Shakir the focal point of the offense. 3, find a role for Jack Sears. I read a very, very disturbing article in Idaho Statesman this week talking about how there's nothing wrong, apparently, they're saying there's nothing wrong with Jack Sears here, and that Boise State's just not mixing him into the game because the coaches don't like to interrupt the offensive rhythm of the quarterback out there, and they trust Bachmeier. Look, I'm wearing a number 19 jersey. I'm not saying don't trust Bachmeier. I think he's the guy for Boise State. I think he is the best starting quarterback for Boise State on this roster, despite some of his inconsistencies and honestly, some of the games he's cost Boise State through pushing interceptions. I still have trust and faith in Bachmeier and his performance. But Jack Sears is an incredible talent for Boise State, and his skill set could fix some of the issues that Boise State is having offensively. Boise State is only 46% completing third down conversions. They're also only 3 of 8 converting fourth downs, and they are 17 of 32 in getting touchdowns in the red zone. Only a 53% touchdown percentage. Now, they do have 12 field goals in the red zone, which moves them up to 28th overall in scoring in the red zone out of the entire country, so which is a good number. But the most important number here for Boise State is the touchdowns. It's great to have a really reliable kicker like Boise State does have in Dalmez, but what wins games ultimately is touchdowns. That's what's going to keep Boise State not just in these games being able to dominate and take it out of the hands of the refs, is getting those touchdowns. And they are struggling when they get inside of these short yardage situations. Well, bing, bing, bing. Jack Sears is exactly the kind of guy that can fix that. He's very speedy, very maneuverable, good running quarterback, very pro style. He's an accurate passer, especially in the short game, but also in the long game. He brings a lot to the table. And you know what? If Boise State doesn't use him, if they don't find a role for him in this offense, they are going to lose him at the end of the year if Bachmeier ends up sticking around for another season, which I think he will at this point, the way that things have turned out, and I think the way this coaching staff is moving in the right direction. I think that Bachmeier would end up sticking around. Either way, they're not going to keep both of them on the roster, and they're definitely not going to keep Jack Sears if Bachmeier returns as a starter next season. I think it is emblematic, like I'm talking about earlier, about a young coaching staff, but a veteran coaching staff knows when to mix in those key players, those players with those special skill sets, such as Jack Sears, know when to mix in a quarterback into the mix that's not usually out there. You know, we saw that Boise State has done that so successfully in the past with Montel Cozart, with Henderson, Chase Cord. Boise State has had huge success in this. They've done it a little bit to the excess, especially I think with Montel Cozart. We saw it a little bit. It was almost throwing Brett Rippon off of his rhythm in those games, in the amount that Boise State was interchanging quarterbacks. So I'm not saying that Boise State should have a quarterback carousel right now, but they should be finding roles for Jack Sears. I keep saying Jake, and I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I think I'm just really tired. Anyhow, they need to find a role for Jack Sears in this offense because he has a ton to contribute, unless he's hurt. Unless Boise State is just not being upfront about that and he has an injury, which of course we saw that in training camp that kind of knocked him out of the quarterback battle there late. If that's the reason and Boise State's just trying to find an excuse to not say anything, which I absolutely could see them doing, then that's a different story. But if he's healthy, if he's good to go, then Boise State needs to be finding a way to mix him into the game here. A quarterback of his caliber should not be riding the bench for Boise State when he has a ton to contribute. All right, so 3 keys to the game. Take it out of the ref's hands, make Shakir the focal point of the offense, and find a role for Jack Sears. All right, so summary here. What are we looking at? Is it going to be as close as the experts predict? Can this be the year that Colorado State finally goes out and gets that win against Boise State? They have wanted it and been going after it so hard for so many years. It is in Fort Collins. They have great athletic facilities. They have a huge athletic budget. They are recruiting, or they're attempting to recruit at a high level. Can Colorado State get the win here? Well, let's talk about that. Colorado State, as far as their passing numbers go, it's pretty good, 234 yards per game, and they allow 194 passing yards per game. The run game isn't as prolific here, 172 yards per game rushing and allowing 101 yards per game rushing. Like I said, this is a Colorado State team that is better than their record. They should have had a win against Vanderbilt. That was a 3-point loss, so that's one win back. They should have beat Utah State last week if they could have figured out how to spike the football. Spike the football. Sorry, that was so crazy to watch. Just ran down, and we're totally in field goal range at like 12 seconds on the clock, or 20 seconds. I mean, they had plenty of time, like 17 seconds. And yeah, whatever the time was, they had plenty of time to spike the ball and kick a field goal. And they tried to run their special teams unit out on the field, and then just completely flubbed the PAT attempt, and the time ran out. It was hilarious. Anyhow, so that should have been a win against Utah State. So that's 2 wins back right there off the bat. This should be a Colorado State team that is sitting not here at 3-4, but sitting at 5-2. And honestly, they were close in that game against Iowa. They could have won that game if not for the second half performance of Iowa in that matchup. So this is a Colorado State team that could be sitting here at 6-1 with a win against a now top 10 opponent in Iowa here. So this is a very, very good, very, very good. I'm not going to say very, very good Colorado State team because they're not closing the games like they should. But this is a Colorado State team that is better than their record. So pretty much the only loss that is unpreventable is that massive blowout at the beginning of the season. I believe it was to South Dakota State. But even then, that's a good FCS program. So this is a Colorado State team that Boise State cannot overlook. Now, Boise State, on the other hand, their 4 losses, combined margin of defeat in those 4 losses is only 23 points. And if you take away the 10-point spread, which was the largest of the 4 against Nevada, it's only 13 points in 3 games. So Boise State has been right in it. You know, fans are bemoaning this 3-4 season and what's going on with Boise State and we need to fire the coaching staff and all this overreaction. But the fact is, with a brand new coaching staff, with a team that had a lot of issues, honestly, taking over from last season that have just been exposed with this new coaching staff, and against a very tough schedule. It's one of the toughest schedules that Boise State has played as far as conference play and out-of-conference play that they've played in a long time. They have been right in these games, and they are honestly looking at a few referee calls or a few turnovers not happening or a few plays away from an undefeated season. I mean, this is a Boise State team that has not been blown out. They have been right in every single game. I think as we see this coaching staff continue to develop, moving into next season, they will get more control of this team. They'll get a better understanding of what needs to happen in these games and what, these are coaching staff. None of these guys have coached at their current level in the FBS. Andy Avalos, first-year head coach. Tim Plow and the defensive coordinator, first-year FBS coaches at their position. So this is when you talk about brand new coaching staffs, this is a brand new coaching staff. This is a whole new world for them, what they're dealing with. And they are doing an excellent job considering circumstances of adapting and continuing to improve week after week after week. Now, Boise State is coming off of a bye. Colorado State is coming off of a very tough loss last week. Boise State, like I said, they're continuing to improve every single week, and now they're coming off of a tough loss against Air Force with a bye. I think Boise State definitely gets the win in this one. And you know what? I think Boise State takes a huge step forward. I think we finally see Boise State. I didn't think their offense was that bad last week. I think they were really hurt by terrible calls by the referees and a couple of shooting themselves in the foot with some penalties they actually caused. But as far as their execution, aside from the penalties, I think you'd be looking, if you took away all the penalties to include the ones the referees caused against them, Boise State would be looking at having another 2 touchdowns probably, maybe 10 or 17 more points on the board and winning that game. So they were very, very close. Their offense, I thought, performed well in that one, and I think it's getting better every week. Offensive line is finally starting to improve. Boise State, I think, is going to get a couple players back from injury. I think Boise State takes a huge step forward in this one. Defense plays up to the standard in this game and allows some points by Colorado State, absolutely. And Colorado State probably hangs in there early in the first half, even into the third. But I think Boise State pushes away for a big win here against Colorado State. I'm calling Boise State 48, Colorado State 27 in this matchup. So well over on the over-under with a Boise State victory. I think that this is the game that Boise State, they're still in the competition for a Mountain West Conference championship game, which is their number one goal. It's a bit of a long shot, but not necessarily as bad as it could be. I mean, everything that could have gone right last week went right. If they beat Colorado State, they'll be ahead of Colorado State. Utah State, if they lose, you just need Utah State to lose one more game, and then all they need is for Air Force to lose one more game. And Boise State, if they go undefeated, which is a big if considering the teams they play, if they go undefeated, they're in the Mountain West Championship game. So Boise State is not out of this hunt at all. They don't control their own destiny, but they are definitely still in the hunt for a Mountain West Championship game. They have that motivation, they have that drive, they want to prove that they are better. They're hearing all this negative chit-chat about who they are, even if they're trying to close their ears and focus on their program. The players and coaches definitely still hear it. They're tired of hearing it. They're coming in with a chip on their shoulder. They believe they should have won last week. They're going to come in off this bye week and finally take a big step forward. Boise State comes in, beats Colorado State in Fort Collins to get that signature, not necessarily massive blowout, but a good win against a good Colorado State program. I'm calling 48-27 Boise State. Thank you for watching this video. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure you like and subscribe. Apologize for any mumbling, stumbling over, or missing words. I made this video very late. We had a tornado watch, so I kind of ended up making the video later than I wanted to because I wanted to watch the storms. It's like 2 a.m. here right now, so I apologize for that. I promise to do better in my future videos, but thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, if you aren't already a subscriber, make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue!